In your opinion, this whole culture is a failure?
The stupidity of a nuclear arms race, the development of weapons. I'll tell you what's going on.
Death, war, murder,
the drones,
massacre, terror,
slut, radiation, torture,
rioting,
oil spill,
surveillance,
cameras, this so-called metadata
to wiretap anyone, and it's going to get worse.
I say, looking at the next 100 years, that there are two trends in the world today. The first trend is toward what we call a type 1 civilization, a planetary civilization, a civilization that resembles something out of Buck Rogers or Flash Gordon. A type 2 civilization is stellar. They consume so much energy, they can play with stars. That's, for example, the Federation of Planets in Star Trek. Star Trek would represent the typical type 2 civilization. Then we have type 3, which is galactic, like the Borg, or Independence Day, or the Empire of The Empire Strikes Back. That is a type 3 civilization, which is truly galactic. Now, by the time you reach type 2, you are immortal. Nothing known to science can destroy a type 2 civilization. Comets, meteors, earthquakes, even a supernova. A type 2 civilization would be able to survive even a supernova. The danger is the transition between type 0 and type 1. And that's where we are today. We are a type 0 civilization. We get our energy from dead plants, oil and coal. But if you get a calculator, you can calculate when we will attain type 1 status. The answer is, in about 100 years, we will become planetary. We'll be able to harness all the energy output of the planet Earth. We'll play with the weather, earthquakes, volcanoes, anything planetary we will play with. The danger period is now, because we still have the savagery. We still have all the passions. We have all the sectarian fundamentalist ideas circulating around, but we also have nuclear weapons. We have chemical, biological weapons capable of wiping out life on Earth.
So man today is a very stupid animal. Your society is primitive. As long as we go to war, as long as we indoctrinate soldiers so they become killing machines. See, instead of training millions of soldiers to be killing machines, I'd rather train them in being problem solvers. Send them back to school, teach them social science, social psychology, sociology, so they can add to the culture, not be destructive. We are not civilized. As long as you have prisons, police, we are not civilized. The real question is, what kind of world do we want to live in?
The spacecraft was a long way from home. I thought it might be a good idea, just after Saturn, to have them take one last glance homeward. From Saturn, the Earth would appear too small for Voyager to make out any detail. Our planet would be just a point of light, a lonely pixel, hardly distinguishable from the many other points of light Voyager would see, nearby planets, far-off suns. But precisely because of the obscurity of our world thus revealed, such a picture might be worth having. It had been well understood by the scientists and philosophers of classical antiquity that the Earth was a mere point in a vast, encompassing cosmos. But no one had ever seen it as such. Here was our first chance, and perhaps also our last, for decades to come. So, here they are, a mosaic of squares laid down on top of the planets, and a background smattering of more distant stars. Because of the reflection of sunlight off the spacecraft, the Earth seems to be sitting in a beam of light, as if there was some special significance to this small world. But it's just an accident of geometry and optics. There is no sign of humans in this picture. Not our reworking of the Earth's surface, not our machines, not ourselves. From this vantage point, our obsession with nationalism is nowhere in evidence. We are too small. On the scale of worlds, humans are inconsequential. A thin film of life on an obscure and solitary lump of rock and metal. Consider again that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there, on the mote of dust, suspended in a sunbeam. The earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors, so that in glory and triumph they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner. How frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe, are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. The Earth is the only world known so far to harbor life. There is nowhere else, at least in the near future, to which our species could migrate. Visit? Yes. Settle? Not yet. Like it or not, for the moment, the Earth is where we make our stand. It has been said that astronomy is a humbling and character-building experience. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot.
The Earth is all-powerful. Wasn't made here for human beings. He said we're part of it. But we don't have to be here because the Earth has its own process. And if it becomes to the point where you destroy yourself as human beings and you destroy life and finally leave this Earth, the Earth's not going to disappear. There's not going to be an end of the world. That's really a very interesting concept to us. No, the world won't end. People's life on it will. So it's not the end of the world you're talking about, it's the end of us.
There is no purpose to life. That's a hard thing to accept. People, ego, think that Fresco is here to help make the world a better place. Well, that's pleasing to me, but I don't buy that shit. I know that nature has no purpose. So they say we have eyes to see with. Now that makes sense to all normal people, which are completely fucked up. So whenever a scientist comes in my lab and says the purpose of eyes are to see, and I say, do you really believe that? He says, yeah. So I take him in a closet and close the door and say, see. He says, I can't see anything, put the light on. So you have eyes and you see if there's light, but you don't have eyes to see with. They think you have ears to hear with. No, you have ears and you hear. Some animals' ears turn in different directions toward the sound.
vuestra obediencia. Un profesor ordena y el alumno obedece. ¿Por qué? Stanley Milgram. El bueno de Milgram comprobó cuánto daño es capaz de infligir una persona a otra simplemente por el hecho de que alguien le ordene que lo haga. El experimentador persuade al participante para que dé descargas al sujeto si éste no responde correctamente a ciertas preguntas. Llegaron a aplicar más de 400 voltios. Afortunadamente, como ya os he dicho, el voltaje no era real.
Gente más bestia.
Gente como tú y como yo. Como efecto Pigmalión.
¿Y eso qué es?
Muy sencillo. Si tú me haces creer a mí que eres un alumno genial, acabarás siéndolo. Ajústate al rol de buen estudiante y los profesores te evaluarán bien. Ajústate al de mal alumno y te cogerán manía. Somos lo que la gente espera que seamos. La realidad es una construcción social. Rosenham intentó introducir falsos enfermos mentales en un psiquiátrico. Todos fueron aceptados.
Bueno, pero porque estaban mintiendo. Si mientes es posible que te tomen por un loco de verdad, pero hay métodos para saber si una enfermedad mental es verdadera o no.
A Rosenham le reprocharon lo mismo. ¿Y sabes qué pasó? Que anunció que enviaría falsos enfermos mentales a otro centro. El psiquiátrico aceptó el reto. Rechazaron a más de 100 personas por ser falsos enfermos mentales. La cuestión, que Rosenham no envió a ningún cómplice. Mirad, en un experimento se hicieron 2 grupos de ratas a las que se le dio morfina. Uno de ellos vivía en un lugar espacioso, con numerosas ventajas. El otro vivía en una jaula en pésimas condiciones. Bueno, pues al que vivía en el parque de ratas, apenas si le afectó la droga. En cambio, el otro acabó destrozado. Las condiciones sociales lo determinan todo. Porque cada cultura, cada época, crea sus mitos sociales. Lo diré de otra manera. La realidad es un delirio colectivo. En Alemania, en el siglo XIX, una novela romántica provocó una oleada de suicidios.
Eso no es magia, es histeria colectiva.
Two farmers walking down the road. One of them says to the other, you hear about them Wright brothers trying to build a flying machine? The guy laughs, he spits. He says, if the good Lord wanted man to fly, he'd have been born with wings. Oh, if the good Lord wanted you to wear clothing, you'd have been born with a suit. If he wanted you to live in a house, you'd have been born in a house. So all that stupid stuff.
Realidad, existencia real y efectiva de algo. Verdad, lo que ocurre verdaderamente. Lo que es efectivo o tiene valor práctico en contraposición con lo fantástico e ilusorio.
This isn't real. What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain. This is the world that you know.
Oblivion, I recognize nothing but unyielding unconsciousness, in which we have almost comfortably drowned. It is madness. This normality is madness. It is madness. We are clinging to manufactured, crippling constraints. We must no longer commute between brand-laden homes and quickly accepted aimless roams from our factories of slavery to wars of elusive bravery.
As we witness the world evolve, is the individual in effect devolving? With each passing moment, our lives are moving at a faster rate, rushing. But do we ever pause and reflect, ponder, question? How did it come to this? A world run through systems, a mechanical labyrinth, built as a prison where the bars are invisible. It exploits our insecurities, enriches itself on our ignorance, suppresses our ambitions. Have our goals been diverted from achieving the infinite to supplicating for the temporary? Have we lost sense of ourselves? Is the thing we are chasing real or illusion? Have we been deceived? Have we begun to believe his lies? Have we accepted his definition of happiness, success, truth? Have we been deceived to believe in the false and reject the truth?
That's the trick! Learn to live simple. They hate it. Learn to say, I'm good, you can keep it.
In ancient Rome, they used to feed Christians to lions. How many of you knew that? Because they knew, they were brought up to believe in many different gods. The god of war, the god of love, the god of peace. They had all kinds of gods. And when the Christians came to town, that there's only one God. And they got mad as hell at them because they were brought up differently. So they put all these Christians in an arena and they starved the lions for a week so they had nothing to eat. Then they turned the Christians loose, the lions loose. Well, it was a little difficult for the lions because the people were dressed, so they took the clothing off the people later, so you get a better show. So the whole family used to come Saturday and Sunday to see Christians fed to lions. And the kids would say, Daddy, can I come next week to see Christians fed to lions? And Daddy would say, if you behave yourself. Is the daddy nuts? No. That was normal to that culture. It's normal for us to go to prize fights and watch two guys bang the hell out of each other because we say, hey, it was a great fight. We watch a football game. It's the same story over and over again. A guy running with a ball, another guy tackling him. Same thing, nothing new. That is to keep your attention off everything else. There are many people that feel they like the world the way it is. That means you're a victim of your culture. You've been subdued and your values have been altered to fit the culture.
developing a society because of all of these different toxins known to affect brain function. We're seeing a society that not only has a lot more people of lower IQ, but a lot fewer people of higher IQ. In other words, a dumbing down, a chemical dumbing down of society. So everyone's sort of mediocre. That leaves them dependent on government because they can't excel.
Whiny, narcissistic, self-indulgent people with a simple philosophy. Give me it, it's mine! Give me that, it's mine! These people were given everything. Everything was handed to them. And they took it all. Took it all. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And they stayed loaded for 20 years and had a free ride. But now they're staring down the barrel of middle-age burnout. And they don't like it. They don't like it, so they've turned self-righteous. And they want to make things hard on younger people. They tell them abstain from sex, say no to drugs. As for the rock and roll, they sold that for television commercials a long time ago. So they could buy pasta machines and Stairmasters and soybean future. They're cold, bloodless people. It's in their slogans, it's in their rhetoric. No pain, no gain. Just do it. Life is short, play hard. Shit happens, deal with it. Get a life. These people went from do your own thing to just say no. They went from love is all you need to whoever winds up with the most toys wins.
Peu importe nos croyances ou nos idées politiques, le système mis en place dans notre monde libre repose sur une sorte de contrat passé avec chacun d'entre nous. Vous le signez chaque matin simplement en ne faisant rien.
Es el solitario y aislado ser humano el que está acabado. El concepto de independencia ha terminado. Porque esta ya no es una nación habitada por individuos independientes. Es una nación de unos 200 y pico de millones de cuerpos transistorizados, sin olor ni color, totalmente asépticos, oprimidos, constreñidos, anulados como seres humanos, mecanizados como vulgares robots. Bien, ha llegado el momento de preguntarse si la palabra deshumanización es una palabra tan mala. Pero buena o mala es un hecho. El mundo entero se está volviendo inhumano. Criaturas que tienen aspecto de humanos no lo son. Todo el mundo, no solo nosotros, pero como somos el país más civilizado, llegaremos antes. Todos los habitantes del mundo se están transformando en objetos fabricados en serie, programados, numerados.
Hay millones viviendo en la pobreza extrema y unos cuantos viviendo en la opulencia.
Por primera vez en la historia estamos siendo forzados hacia un sistema de interdependencia inexorable, ciegos a las consecuencias de nuestras acciones. Pareciera que cualquier movimiento que hacemos en este frágil sistema global resulta en reacciones en cadena que no podemos controlar. Y lo peor es que todavía pensamos que podemos manejar la situación.
Que la naturaleza del hombre es enteramente egoísta y que cada uno de nosotros está construido de esa manera que yo naturalmente hago cuentas con cada uno y con el mundo entero solo para poder ganar, para triunfar, para ser más que todos. No busco mi bienestar en la conexión con los demás, sino que busco sentirme bien de superar a todos los demás.
Y todos los 7.000 millones de puntos de vista en el mundo están siendo apretujados uno con el otro en un solo tiempo y un solo espacio, sin encontrar la salida. Sin embargo, un ligero cambio en nuestra perspectiva revela que hay una puerta que conduce hacia una nueva dimensión.
Te explicaré por qué estás aquí. Estás porque sabes algo, aunque lo que sabes no lo puedes explicar, pero lo percibes. Ha sido así durante toda tu vida. Algo no funciona en el mundo, no sabes lo que es, pero ahí está como una pastilla clavada en tu mente y te está enloqueciendo.
Where the idea has been to turn us into left brain prisoners. Even conventional science accepts that the left brain is where we get intellect, logic, physical worldview. Can I touch it, taste it, smell it? Okay, it must exist. In the right brain, you have the bigger picture, the connection with the cosmos. That's where the artist, the inspiration, the creativity comes from. And if you look at the institutions of education, of science, and all these different areas of information, the media too, they're pumping information of a left brain variety and suppressing this. So you get a situation where what we call education works like this. Information is pumped into the left brain, most of it completely rubbish. And what people are asked to do, students are asked to do, is to hold that information there, and then when they get an exam paper in front of them, to regurgitate that onto the paper. If they remember it and put it there well enough, and repeat what they've been told, they pass the exam and progress. If they take that information in the left brain, transfer it to the right and start filtering it and questioning it, and saying, well, does it make sense, what do I think about this, and then tell the exam paper, oh, actually it's a piece of shit, this stuff, then they don't pass the exam, and they don't progress. The education system is completely built to create left-brain prisoners who are basically sponges of the official version of life. And if you're a scientist, for instance, you go through that, and then you go to your speciality in science, and you get more left-brain information. Same with doctors and all these professions. They're left-brain prisoners who cannot conceive so much of what I've been talking about here because they're imprisoned in the intellect.
Now, writers get paid by the amount of books they write, amount of words they can stick in the book. Well, that's commercial, and that takes it away from information. And I was teaching a course, a 5-year course, and the students were learning it in 1 month. And the principal came out and he said, hey, Jock, this is a 5-year course. That means he doesn't give a shit about people.
In general, people are innumerate, which is the mathematical equivalent of illiteracy.
They said we need more money for education. We need more books, more teachers, more classrooms, more schools. We need more testing for the kids. You say to them, well, you know, we've tried all of that, and the kids still can't pass the test. He said, don't you worry about that. We're going to lower the passing grades. And that's what they do in a lot of these schools now. They lower the passing grades so more kids can pass. More kids pass, the school looks good, everybody's happy, the IQ of the country slips another 2 or 3 points, and pretty soon all you'll need to get into college is a fucking pencil. Got a pencil? Get the fuck in there, it's physics.
Los niños no son recompensados al cuestionarse la validez de la información que reciben. Son ridiculizados. Sin embargo, los niños, quienes ciegamente aceptan la información como válida y simplemente repiten mecánicamente la información. Cuando es hora de tomar un examen, esos niños serán quienes tomen las decisiones en el futuro, dentro de un gobierno, para hacer las leyes, en el campo de la medicina, negocios y cualquier otra profesión de poder y prestigio. El efecto más perjudicial de ser alejado del pensamiento holístico con cerebro completo.
Schools do not teach you much. They're mostly concerned with propaganda. Most schools don't teach you how to live, find meaning in your own life. We are victims of culture, all of us. That's why we have a distorted view. We believe that some people are good, some are bad, some are creative, some are less creative. All that's bunk. Everyone can be creative.
But there's a reason. There's a reason. There's a reason for this. There's a reason education sucks, and it's the same reason that it will never, ever, ever be fixed. It's never going to get any better. Don't look for it. Be happy with what you got. Because the owners of this country don't want that. I'm talking about the real owners now. The real owners, the big wealthy business interests that control things and make all the important decisions. Forget the politicians. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets. And they own all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls.
You've been living in a dream world, Neo. This is the world as it exists today.
His name is Charlie. 72 days old.
Su nombre es Carlitos. Tiene 72 días de edad.
They are close neighbors. They'll need each other. They should help each other. They should trust each other. Learn from each other.
El problema no es de Charlie o Carlitos, ni de sus países de procedencia. Para aquellos que controlan el mundo, Charlie y Carlitos son simplemente archivos vacíos, listos para ser alimentados con información, máquinas en proceso de desarrollo preparándose para eventualmente servir al sistema.
Right now, Charlie and Carlitos are helpless. They can't assume responsibility for their actions. But one day, both babies will become adults. Will they be passive, obedient, blind consumers, working for the construction and preservation of a destructive global empire?
¿O cuestionarán toda la información que los invada durante su vida consciente? La ley de probabilidades nos obliga a pensar que serán productos. Es en la era de la cultura del consumo donde el ser humano vale por la cantidad de cosas que tiene y aprende a despreciarse a sí mismo. El consumidor acepta la idea del valor supremo de todo aquello que es material y vive en la frustración permanente al no tener todo lo que cree necesitar. Esta idea nos está matando gradualmente. Está exterminando a la humanidad. Tal vez podríamos evolucionar si el ser humano aprendiera a valorarse un poco más.
Looks like rain again today. Dark clouds gather and fill the sky. Don't know how to talk to you, just know how to say goodbye.
Would you actually got a driver's license? I don't think so. Did you see his back there, George? Go back where you came from. Learn this movie. Go back where you came from. You don't know anything to me. What's wrong with you, Harry?
Get over here. You don't want to think. I've had enough of you. I've had enough of you.
To fear, to guilt, to resentment, to lack of self-esteem. And the more that we are manipulated to feel those things, and the more we manipulate each other to feel those things, the more what I call that cesspit vibration of low vibrational emotion gets more and more full and more difficult to see ourselves as either just a physical body or subjected to some God and what have you. The programming gets started from the moment we become conscious. A friend of mine once said something very true. If you're born to loving parents and they tell you that 2 and 2 equals 5, and then you go on to nice teachers and they tell you 2 and 2 equals 5, and then you go on to university and professors with letters after their name tell you 2 and 2 equals 5, all your peers around you are telling you the same because they've been through the same system. The media is telling you constantly 2 and 2 equals 5. It's no surprise that the vast majority of people go through their lives believing 2 and 2 equals 5. The conditioning of belief which disconnects us from who we really are. And if we can just break that eggshell and we can express the true nature of who we are and not live someone else's version of what we should be, when the eggshell cracks, we reconnect with mission control. And at that point, we taste freedom. And that is the challenge now that we all have, and the opportunity we all have. Chinese have a word that means both danger and opportunity. We're at the point now of that choice. Because that's what life is. It's a choice and learning from the consequences of the choice and making different choices and learning from the consequences of them. That's what evolution is.
The greatest form of control is where you think you're free when you're being fundamentally manipulated and dictated to. One form of dictatorship is being in a prison cell and you can see the bars and touch them. The other one is sitting in a prison cell but you can't see the bars, so you think you're free.
What the human race is suffering from is mass hypnosis. We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers.
We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely enormous.
Está por todas partes, incluso ahora en esta misma habitación. Puedes verla si miras por la ventana o al encender la televisión. Puedes sentirla cuando vas a trabajar, cuando vas a la iglesia, cuando pagas tus impuestos. Es el mundo que ha sido puesto ante tus ojos para ocultarte la verdad.
¿Qué verdad?
Que eres un esclavo, Neo. Igual que los demás, naciste en cautiverio, naciste en una prisión que no puedes ni saborear, ni oler, ni tocar. Una prisión para tu mente.
Because less than 3% of you people read books. Because less than 15% of you read newspapers. Because the only truth you know is what you get over this tube. Right now, there is an entire generation that never knew anything that didn't come out of this tube. This tube is the gospel, the ultimate revelation. This tube can make or break presidents, popes, Prime Ministers, this tube is the most awesome goddamn force in the whole godless world. And woe is us if it ever falls into the hands of the wrong people. And the 12th largest company in the world controls the most awesome goddamn propaganda force in the whole godless world. Who knows what shit will be peddled for truth on this network? So you listen to me. Listen to me. Television is not the truth. Television is a goddamn amusement park. Television is a circus, a carnival, a traveling troupe of acrobats, storytellers, dancers, singers, jugglers, sideshow freaks, lion tamers, and football players. We're in the boredom-killing business. Want the truth? Go to yourselves, because that's the only place you're ever going to find any real truth. But man, you're never going to get any truth from us. We'll tell you anything you want to hear. We lie like hell. No matter how much trouble the hero is in, don't worry, just look at your watch. At the end of the hour, he's going to win. We'll tell you any shit you want to hear. We deal in illusions, man. None of it is true. But you people sit there day after day, night after night, all ages, colors, creeds. We're all you know. You're beginning to believe the illusions we're spinning here. You're beginning to think that the tube is reality and that your own lives are unreal. You do whatever the tube tells you. You dress like the tube. You eat like the tube. You raise your children like the tube. You even think like the tube. This is mass madness, you maniacs. In God's name, you people are the real thing. We are the illusion. So turn off your television sets. Turn them off now.
The greatest hypnotist on planet Earth is a oblong box in the corner of the room. It is constantly telling us what to believe is real.
ينتظرونكم على أحر من الجمر.
If you can persuade people that what they see with their eyes is what there is to see, you're gone. Because they'll laugh in the face of an explanation that portrays the bigger picture of what's happening. And they have.
Opinions of people which are based upon propaganda.
You have a right to your opinion, and we respect that opinion.
We have these people of lower IQ who are totally dependent. Then we have this mass of people who are going to believe anything they're told because they can't really think clearly. And very few people of very high IQ who have good cognitive function who can figure this all out. And that's what they want. So, you know, you can kind of piece it together as to why they are so insistent in spending so many hundreds of millions of dollars of propaganda money to dumb down society.
Americans aren't sort of genetically predisposed to being consumers. We are, I would say, victims of the greatest propaganda system ever devised in human history, which is the modern advertising industry. Something like $200 billion a year spent to convince us to buy, use, and consume, and we've gotten to think of this as normal. Growth is normal. We've experienced it for the past couple of hundred years, and we project that into the future and think that this is normal life. Well, there's nothing normal about it.
You've got an entire generation that has been brought up in a completely artificial environment where their beliefs have been shaped by television, which is designed to sell things like huge SUVs, and then by movies, which are completely, disconnected from reality, particularly here in Western culture, where the good guys always win and there's always a happy ending, and we're not citizens, we're consumers. So all we relate to is celebrities in the media, and I do think it's sort of on purpose, because if you're an automobile manufacturer and television station A starts running all these programs about all the economic and energetic and environmental issues we're facing, they're not going to get as high a return on investment as they would if they sell ads on another television station that's talking about how wonderful everything is, or is only talking about celebrity this and celebrity that. So it's sort of, I don't know that there's anybody sitting around planning. I wouldn't be surprised if there is, but it sort of works out that way, that what tends to sell stuff the most happens to be stuff that also turns the viewer into a bumbling idiot.
El rey y el príncipe de Asturias se han sumado hoy a las condenas.
Cristiano Ronaldo suma un nuevo capítulo del Manchester
y han propuesto una jornada laboral de 65 horas.
For some, the United States of America is a land where God shed his grace. America, beautiful for spacious skies, beautiful for amber waves, for purple mountain majestics. America, land of the free, a land of heroes. Superman, Batman, Spider-Man. For others, the United States of America represents a giant empire controlled by nameless overlords with an insatiable appetite for power and global dominance. The influence of the United States is extremely powerful all over the globe. But what about the influence of the most powerful nation on Earth on their closest third world neighbor? Mexico. For some, a beautiful country rich in culture, ancient tradition, and mysticism. For others, a dangerous land dominated by drug lords, crime, and corruption. The U.S. needs Mexico, and Mexico needs the U.S. And both nations are completely controlled by the media, as is every other nation on this planet.
Bueno, cada día se aprende algo nuevo, ¿no?
¿Y hoy usted qué aprendió?
Es que en verdad son necesarias y convenientes las inversiones extranjeras.
No lo dude.
You understand, all your television shows are followed by commercials, which are all BS. All your commercials are annoying, and everything you get on the soap opera is always the same story. A guy in love with a girl and he shoots for somebody else. It's always the same story. Novels, everything. But you watch that because you're conditioned to it. You don't know anything else. You learn a language.
Desde que aparecieron los medios de comunicación de masas, los individuos que conformamos esta sociedad hemos delegado nuestra percepción de aquello que no podemos abarcar en estos poseedores de la información. Los procesos de selección de esta información se convierten en filtros de la realidad.
Por la mañana lo que te piden es un tema para poder vender a mediodía. Y si haces un tema por la tarde es para venderlo por la noche. O sea que lo que es el trabajo así de investigación y demás suele estar muy limitado a eso, a lo que son las rutinas.
Lo que sucede con este proceso es que se crean muchos automatismos y los medios reciben por medio de las agencias ya un plantel de noticias estructurado que ellos se limitan a modificar brevemente, ¿no?
Y en el 80% de los casos se acude por comodidad, por inmediatez, por rapidez a ese tipo de información. Incluso ahora está muy de moda enviar imágenes editadas por las propias instituciones para que la aproveche, en nuestro caso en el medio audiovisual, y producir la noticia prácticamente con las imágenes que ellos te dan. Por facilidad, sí, por ahorro económico también.
Lo importante es tener el tema a la hora del envío.
Cada día más se tiende a la espectacularización de la información, es decir, se eligen acontecimientos que atraigan el interés del espectador.
La agenda setting supone un debate constante entre los profesionales del sector audiovisual. Aún no se ha llegado a un método capaz de reflejar la realidad. Existen tantas realidades como mentes nos rodean. El poder sintetizarlas dependerá de nuestra honestidad y nuestra voluntad.
La Eurocopa.
La Eurocopa.
La Eurocopa y la de Obama.
Y la elección de Obama.
La victoria de Obama.
Estamos en crisis. Lo que nos afecta más rápido, más urgente, es la huelga del transporte y el combustible.
Todos los años, millones de personas mueren de hambre en este planeta. Y sin embargo, este planeta rico desborda riqueza. El orden del planeta es mortífero y absurdo. Hay que cambiar ese orden criminal del mundo.
Detrás de los 12 o 14 más medias más importantes de Estados Unidos. Son los que marcan opinión pública en general y son los que además son atendidos por todos los países del mundo para lanzar pues las noticias que consideran más importantes.
All been raised on television to believe that one day we'd all be millionaires and movie gods and rock stars, but we won't. We're slowly learning that fact. We're very, very pissed off.
This is known as the Nessus-spotted repeater. This is a very common sight where truth is being annihilated.
Have you ever heard that phrase, everyone knows that, mate? Well, why does everyone know that?
Well, it's because this system is controlled by what I call repeaters. They're people in the situations of power and influence who just repeat what someone else tells them. A doctor is repeating what they were told at medical school and what the drug companies tell them. You've got teachers who repeat what they learned in their exams and what they learned at teacher training college, and they repeat that to the next generation. And the great repeaters are what pass for journalists. This is that area outside Parliament where they stand there doing their pieces to camera, telling people what's going on. Here we have the crews waiting for the journalists to come across from Westminster and stand there and tell them what's happening in the world. The fact is, they don't know what's happening. They know nothing. So this is what they should be saying if they were telling the truth. Now over to Westminster for the latest news from David Icke. Thank you, you. Well, I've got to be honest, mate. I haven't got a clue what's going on. I tell you what my job is, right? I wear a dark suit, not normally, but, you know, I'm playing here. And I'm come over from there, and I tell you what they've told me is going on. And I deliver it as if I know what's going on, and it's really true. I haven't got a clue if it's true. But they tell me, and they wouldn't lie, would they? I mean, would Tony Blair lie about what's really happening? Would George Bush, please? I'm a journalist, trust me. And so, what we call news, what you get paid a lot of money for reading AutoCue about, is merely propaganda that they have told me and I tell you. David Icke, BBC, ITN, CNN, CBS, Sky News, Westminster. If you are in any way in fear of what other people think of you, no way, Jose, are you going to start talking and writing about those things.
And what it does, Terry, when you step out of the little box of what will other people think, how do I put this in a way that people won't think I'm crazy, you then realise how small a box you've actually been living in. And what that does is it reveals to you the level of immaturity that passes for adulthood in this country, whereby clearly a guy was going through an incredible experience, and instead of being mature and saying, why is this guy gone from being this what you would call straight, normal television presenter to how he is now? This is interesting, what's happening here? Instead, and I heard the ripples of laughter 16 years on when my name was mentioned.
Vastly, vastly more people, thousands, millions around the world now, who are also in the same mode of thought that they are, in terms of wanting to know what's happening in the world, because the official versions of what's going on make absolutely no sense.
This was George Bush. You're free, and freedom is beautiful. And you know it'll take time to restore chaos and order out of chaos, but we will. Order out of chaos, or as I've dubbed it, problem, reaction, solution. Simple, devastating, played on us by the day. You want to change society in a way that you know if you announce it openly, you're going to get massive reaction. So you don't announce it openly, you play this scam. Stage one, you create a problem. Could be a terrorist event, could be a war, it could be a run on a currency, could be a bird flu. I've just described 9/11, by the way. And I was in a bar just after 9/11, and I was watching CNN live. And I saw Bush stand up and say, and I saw this plane hit the World Trade Center. And he said, this is word for word, he said, and I thought, what a terrible pilot. That's what he said. The first plane was not shown on live television, only the second one. No way in the world is it possible for him to have seen the first plane hit. Total freaking lies. Wanted for terrorism. Biggest terrorist in the world.
There's a lot of greed in the U.S. There's a lot of greed everywhere, but no.
It's just fucked up, man.
Ex George Bush.
Yeah, I mean, it's just gonna get worse.
Yeah,
it's gonna get worse. Look at the position you're in now. I mean, you know, I take the train every day, and you don't know, what's gonna happen. You know, anything at any time can happen, and it's all based on lies.
Today, politicians have no ability to solve any problems because they're not students of behavior, they're not students of agriculture, oceanography. They know nothing about the factors that operate the world. So they say things that people like to hear, and that gets them elected. Now, scientists, on the other hand, are not concerned with public approval. What they do, even if everybody on Earth believed the Earth was flat, they would say, you're wrong, this is the evidence we have to support the fact that the Earth is round. But they don't say, it's a little round, a little flat. That's politicians.
Everybody complains about politicians. Everybody says they suck.
Yeah!
Well, where do people think these politicians come from? They don't fall out of the sky. They don't pass through a membrane from another reality. They come from American parents and American families, American homes, American schools, American churches, American businesses, and American universities, and they're elected by American citizens. This is the best we can do, folks. This is what we have to offer. It's what our system produces. Garbage in, garbage out. If you have selfish, ignorant citizens, you're going to get selfish, ignorant leaders. And term limits ain't going to do you any good. You're just going to wind up with a brand new bunch of selfish, ignorant Americans. So maybe it's not the politicians who suck. Maybe something else sucks around here, like the public. Because if it's really just the fault of these politicians, then where are all the other bright people of conscience? Where are all the bright, honest, intelligent Americans ready to step in and save the nation and lead the way? We don't have people like that in this country. Everybody's at the mall, scratching his ass, picking his nose, taking his credit card out of his fanny pack and buying a pair of sneakers with lights in them.
Hombres de negocios, profesores, abogados, carpinteros. Son las mentes de los mismos que intentamos salvar. Pero hasta que no lo hagamos siguen formando parte de ese sistema y eso hace que sean nuestros enemigos. Tienes que entender que la mayoría de ellos no están preparados para ser desactivados y muchos están tan habituados, dependen tanto del sistema, que lucharían para protegerlo.
Hay muchos cartuchos, cuando se lee poco, se dispara mucho.
We like war. We're a warlike people. We like war because we're good at it. And you know why we're good at it? Because we get a lot of practice. This country's only 200 years old, and already we've had 10 major wars. We average a major war every 20 years in this country, so we're good at it. And it's a good thing we are. We're not very good at anything else anymore. Huh? Can't build a decent car, can't make a TV set or a VCR worth a fuck. Got no steel industry left, can't educate our young people, can't get health care to our old people, but we can bomb the shit out of your country, all right? Especially if your country is full of brown people. That's our new job in the world, bombing brown people. Iraq, Panama, Grenada, Libya, you got some brown people in your country, tell them to watch the fuck out, or we'll goddamn bomb them. Well, when's the last white people you can remember that we bombed? Can you remember the last white, can you remember any white people we've ever bombed? The Germans, those are the only ones, and that's only because they were trying to cut in on our action. They wanted to dominate the world. Bullshit, that's our fucking job! Now, you probably noticed I don't feel about that war the way we were told we were supposed to feel about that war, the way we were ordered and instructed by the United States government to feel about that war. My mind doesn't work that way. I got this real moron thing I do, it's called thinking. And I'm not a very good American because I like to form my own opinions. I don't just roll over when I'm told to. Sad to say, most Americans just roll over on command. Not me. I have certain rules I've defied. My first rule, I don't believe anything the government tells me. Nothing. Zero. Nope. And I don't take very seriously the media or the press in this country, who in the case of the Persian Gulf War were nothing more than unpaid employees of the Department of Defense, and who most of the time function as kind of an unofficial public relations agency for the United States government. So I don't listen to them. I don't really believe in my country. And I gotta tell you folks, I don't get all choked up about yellow ribbons and American flags. I consider them to be symbols, and I leave symbols to the symbol-minded.
I'm talking about the fact that a war is rich old men protecting their property by sending middle class and lower class young men off to die. Forget these foolish elections. The owners of this country don't care about the poor in general.
Owners
and
of
they
this
don't care
country,
about
what are we going... But is this Karl Marx talking to me? The owners of this country are the voters of this country.
You're wrong about that, Mike.
Aren't the owners of this country the voters in this country who elected George Bush?
No, they're not. Listen, politics, these elections are a charade. It is a charade.
Oh, okay.
They are meant to... Well, I'll tell you, just listen for a minute. Learn a little something. The elections and politicians are in place in order to give Americans the illusion that they have freedom of choice. You don't really have choice in this country. I don't vote. Two reasons I don't vote. First of all, it's meaningless. This country was bought and sold and paid for a long time ago. The shit they shuffle around every 4 years doesn't mean a fucking thing. And secondly, I don't vote because I believe if you vote, you have no right to complain. People like to twist that around, I know. They say, well, if you don't vote, you have no right to complain. But where's the logic in that? If you vote, and you elect dishonest, incompetent people, and they get into office and screw everything up, well, you are responsible for what they have done. You caused the problem. You voted them in. You have no right to complain. I, on the other hand, did not even leave the house on election day. I'm in no way responsible for what these people have done and have every right to complain as loud as I want about the mess you created that I had nothing to do with. So I know that a little later on this year you're going to have another one of those really swell presidential elections that you like so much. You'll enjoy yourselves. It'll be a lot of fun. I'm sure as soon as the election is over, your country will improve immediately. As for me, I'll be home on that day doing essentially the same thing as you. The only difference is when I get finished masturbating, I'm going to have a little something to show for it, folks.
Anybody, what does democracy mean? They think it means participation in government affairs. So I asked them, do you really believe in democracy? They always say yes. I said, did you vote for the space program? They said, no. Did you vote for the Vietnam War? No. Did you vote for the war now? No. Where the hell do you participate? That's an illusion given to people. They even pick the people you vote for to make sure they'll keep things as they are, the establishment. So they put them out there for you to vote for them. If we lived in a democracy, there'd be 5,000 political parties, different points of view. In a true democracy, you would have that. All points of view expressed on television and radio. They don't know how to run medicine today. They don't know how to run industry today. They don't know how to run government today. So you're electing a bunch of stupid people that are causing this system to collapse. It's happening all over the world, not just America. All the world systems are collapsing. And if you bail them out, it'll collapse again.
All the things that are important reduced in choice. Newspapers in a city, how many? Used to be 3, 4, now it's 1 or 2 that are owned by the same people, and they also own a radio station. Give these people a voting day every year so that they'll have the illusion of meaningless choice. Meaningless choice, that we go like slaves and say, "Yo, I voted." The limits of debate in this country are established before the debate even begins, and everyone else is marginalized. They're made to seem either to be communists or some sort of disloyal person, a kook, there's a word, and now it's conspiracy. See, they've made that something that should not be even entertained for a minute, that powerful people might get together and have a plan. Doesn't happen. You're a kook. You're a conspiracy buff. A conspiracy buff.
Not as a result of a conspiracy, but
you
because...
don't need a formal conspiracy.
Right.
When interests converge, these people went to the same universities and fraternities, they're on the same boards of directors, they're in the same country clubs, they have like interests, they don't need to call a meeting, they know what's good for them, and they're getting it. And there used to be 7 oil companies, there are now 3, it will soon be 2. The things that matter in this country have been reduced in choice. There are 2 political parties, there are a handful of insurance companies, there are about 6 or 7 information things. But if you want a bagel, there are 23 flavors, because you have the illusion. You have the illusion of choice.
Right.
You don't get the real important choice. There's no freedom of choice.
Hey, buddy. You gonna pay for that or what? Look, buddy, I don't want no hassle today. Either pay for it or put it back.
I don't like our country. It's completely corrupt. And that's for most civilizations today. They're all corrupt. I'm sorry to say that. I don't like what I'm saying. I wish it were otherwise.
El derecho a la independencia, el derecho a la soberanía, es hoy por hoy un lujo de los países poderosos, de los países ricos. Cuando los países pobres ejercen el patriotismo, ese patriotismo se convierte en populismo, o peor todavía, en terrorismo, y constituye una amenaza para el mundo. Entonces nosotros no tenemos el derecho de defendernos, solo tenemos el derecho de aceptar lo que otros deciden por nosotros. Y esos otros son los que ejercen el gobierno mundial.
¿Es posible que la mitad de la riqueza del planeta esté en manos de únicamente 400 familias? ¿Es posible que solo el 10% del dinero que circula en el mundo sea real? ¿Es posible que los beneficios reales de la banca sean de un 16.500%? Dime, ¿crees que tal cosa es posible?
Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else. But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest. That's right. You know something? They don't want people who are smart enough to sit around the kitchen table and figure out how badly they're getting fucked by a system that threw them overboard 30 fucking years ago. They don't want that. You know what they want? They want obedient workers. Obedient workers, people who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasingly shittier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it. And now they're coming for your Social Security money. They want your fucking retirement money. They want it back so they can give it to their criminal friends on Wall Street. And you know something? They'll get it. They'll get it all from you sooner or later because they own this fucking place. It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
It's known as the Bilderberg Group. Could their objective be world domination?
I'm not comfortable with that at all. Who elected these guys to run the planet?
They are the elitists. They feel they should run the world for their own selfish interests.
Now we can see a new world coming into view. A world in which there is the very real prospect of a new world order.
Bilderberg is making great progress toward a world government, and only an educated, informed public can stop them in their. And only an educated, informed public can stop them in their.
If few nations control most of the Earth's resources, you're going to have territorial disputes. You're going to have war. You're going to have all the problems you've always had. That's why most people think it's human nature. They think man is basically greedy, and that this is why you have problems. That is not true.
El grupo Bilderberg.
México es actualmente uno de los 5 más grandes productores de petróleo. Es el 10º exportador más grande de petróleo en el mundo y el 4º más grande proveedor de petróleo de los Estados Unidos. La compañía petrolera propiedad del Gobierno de México, Pemex, sostiene un monopolio establecido constitucionalmente para la explotación, producción, transporte y comercialización del petróleo de la nación. El petróleo es parte fundamental de la economía mexicana, al igual que el narcotráfico, el cuarto poder. El narcotráfico genera ganancias de billones de dólares en todo el planeta. Estados Unidos es el principal consumidor de drogas en el mundo.
We humans have been using energy for as long as we've been around. We extract energy from our environments in various ways. Food is the most basic form of energy, and then we exert energy into our environment by way of muscle power. We've been doing that for a very long time, and gradually using our intelligence, our opposable thumbs, language, all of these special gifts, we've been able to increase our ability to extract energy from the environment. But with fossil fuels, we came across an energy source that was far beyond anything we had been using previously. Those of us who are alive today take fossil fuels for granted. We've always had them around. Doesn't matter whether you're 20 years old or 70 years old. We've all grown up during this unique historic period of cheap, abundant energy from coal, oil, and natural gas. Even 150 years ago, something like 65% of the work being done in the American economy was being done by horses, oxen, mules. Another 18% or so was being done just by human muscle power, and the rest, less than 20% of the work getting done, was being done by fuel-fed machines. Now, virtually all the work is being done by fuel-fed machinery.
Some of the miracles of petroleum are familiar to us all. We know, for instance, that oil made possible one of the greatest inventions of history, the internal combustion engine, which gave us mastery over the air, meant mass transportation for the world, changed the face of continents, quickened the very pulse of civilization, provided man with an ease of living. We know, too, that oil is power for our factories. The machine age, which has given us a matchless standard of living, would grind to a stop if it were not for petroleum lubricants. Today it is difficult for you to look in any direction without seeing something made possible or made better with petroleum. At this very moment, you are looking at a film whose acetate base was made with petroleum. You can even hear oil. It's in the plastic in musical instruments. Chances are your day starts with oil. Synthetic glycerin in toothpaste, or alcohol in your shaving lotion. On many modern farms, insecticides in powder form are being replaced by oil vapors and fogs that kill bugs fast, leave no harmful spray residue. The story of petroleum's place in food runs from the field to your refrigerator. Anhydrous ammonia, a refrigerant, has its place here. It quick freezes food as soon as it is packed, so that it reaches you crisp and fresh. Fuel oil furnishes us a safe, economical heat when burning in an automatic furnace in our homes. And it may surprise you to know the list of petroleum products around your living room. They're used in fabrics for the drapes, in paint on the walls, in gloss on the floors. Now let's look outside the home. Asphalt, which paves nearly 500,000 miles of thoroughfares in the United States. And when you get into your car, you're literally surrounded by oil. The plastic on the dashboard. The windshield is made shatterproof with transparent resin that serves as a binder. Modern medicine is aided by petroleum. Its derivatives are used in making penicillin, anesthetics, sedatives. Yes, day in and day out, the men of the laboratory work on, experimenting, testing, discovering. And the fruits of their labors are more wonderful, more practical than anything Aladdin ever produced with his fabulous lamp. Who knows what even greater achievements lie ahead in the incredible realm of petroleum.
I think it's fair to say that oil is the lifeline of our modern global economy. The principal concern here is that we're not really prepared for declining oil production.
But then 200 years ago, with the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, it's like everything goes haywire. The human population goes from fewer than 1 billion to 6.5 billion. And the scale of the human impact on the environment increases exponentially as well. Fossil fuels are the essence of the Industrial Revolution. So that creates a problem because fossil fuels are inherently finite. Oil was created 90 to 150 million years ago. And we're drawing down that stock of highly concentrated fuel in an amazingly short period of time. What's 200 years compared to 150 million years? And that oil is going to be gone virtually by the end of this century.
Our country, we are pretty good at responding to crises. We are not very good at avoiding crises. I just think what we're doing is unconscionable. We're trying to find more and more ways to continue pigging out on energy rather than recognizing that it is finite. There's only a limited amount left. We've got to save something for our kids and our grandkids. 33 of the 48 top oil-producing countries have already peaked.
Self-evident, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
And
great.
it's
All right,
pretty
thank
good
you.
evidence that the peak is, Dr. DeVay's things just passed, or imminent. To really do something to mitigate the consequences, we would have to have started 20 years ago.
Archaeologists study civilizations that have disappeared. What's a major factor in the cause of those disappearances? One factor, it's not the only one, but one factor is they grew beyond the capacity of the surrounding country to supply them with food. And in olden days, you could maybe transport food however far a horse and wagon could travel in maybe a week, something like this. It might be 100 miles, but not farther than that. The average item of food on our table today has traveled 1,500 miles from where it was produced. And the only reason that's possible is that petroleum is so cheap.
In past societies, the problem was that complexity would increase beyond the point that was sustainable with the solar energy that ultimately supported them. We have to remember that they didn't have the fossil fuel energy we have today. So ultimately they reached the point where the complexity of their societies could not be sustained on the basis of solar energy, on the basis of agriculture. When I look at the industrialized world today and try to project how it might develop over the next few decades, what I see are a large number of very expensive problems converging at once. We have not only the problem of energy that is so prominent today, but we have problems involving such things as an aging population and funding the pensions for the people of my generation. We have problems of decaying infrastructure that needs to be maintained and replaced. We have the continuing problems of very high military costs. In ancient societies that I've studied, for example, the Roman Empire, a great problem that they faced was when they would have to incur very high costs just to maintain the status quo. Invest very high amounts in solving problems that don't yield a net positive return, but instead simply allow them to maintain what they've already got.
In the weird specialization of the modern, post-1970s international economy, we're the consumer of first, last resort for a significant portion of the world. And so they'll loan to us so long as we'll borrow, so long as we'll spend, so they can keep producing.
Many people ask me, you know, we're a smart country. How could we be this dumb? How could we allow this to go on? It's one thing to have it happen, we all learn, but since the 1950s or 60s, we've understood about the harms of oil and the harms of tailpipe emissions. How could we continue to allow this to happen? And I have a two-word answer. It's politics and lies. The last 10 or 12 years, oil and auto companies have spent $186 million on campaign contributions at the federal level. And that's for Congress and the President. And for every one of those $186 million, they've gotten back $1,000 in tax breaks and other subsidies. So I think if you could invest $1 in something and get back $1,000, you'd keep doing it. So that's the politics part of it. The lies part of it is that going back to the 1950s, under increasing pressure from regulators, including many right here in California at that time, the auto companies got together and they said, you know what, we'll check our competition at the door on this one issue about smog coming from our tailpipes. And we'll work together with the Automobile Alliance that we're now going to create to make sure that our products are safe when used as directed. In fact, they boasted that if there was any harmful emission coming from tailpipes, that they could engineer that out of all of their vehicles within one model year. And of course, the record shows they formed the Automobile Alliance to do the exact opposite, to lie to regulators, to lie to the public, to conceal the true science of the harms of their products, and to stifle the production of alternatives to their products. Oil and auto companies got together and conspired to kill the electric car, to stifle the development of other alternative technologies that might have brought us cleaner, safer products over these years.
If you wanted a congressman to act in your behalf, you put up a certain amount of money to help them get elected, and you owe that person a favor. And that's the same with the drug companies, the auto companies, the banks. All systems all over the world that use money are basically corrupt.
The fuel industry spent most of the last 15 years funding every absurd disinformation campaign they could think of, and fairly successfully. But one of the reasons they were so successful was because we didn't really want to know the truth either, you know. It's a good deal easier to lie to people when they're happy to have you lying to them.
Reinforces the idea that there are no real consequences to our actions, because even if there's a short-term problem, we will have the ingenuity and the ability to solve it. The society in general then has generation after generation going back with that belief system and those set of expectations. And so to be able to turn that around when all anyone who's alive today can see is just, you know, this era of human progress that goes back into the past and they assume is going to stretch out to the future and is embedded in the laws and the habits that people have. It's just sort of a positive feedback loop. So there you see this cultural constraint then on change that becomes very, very dangerous, because when that is challenged, it's challenging generations of belief and assumptions. And what happens is that those who challenge it are essentially putting themselves outside of their own culture. And that becomes very difficult to handle as an individual, psychologically and emotionally, because you're constantly going to be looking at your own culture and seeing, oh my gosh, it's crazy. It's crazy. And yet the culture will look back at you and say, you're crazy. And it becomes a matter of, you know, understanding epistemology. How do you know what you know? Most people know what they know based upon what their culture has taught them over time. Unquestioning. And then there are people who actually have to study the raw data, and they're trained as scientists to have their belief system based upon evidence. And when that contradicts, generations of belief, they're just like, hear no evil, see no evil, please, get out of my face, I can't handle this. And that became incredibly frustrating to me. I have kids. I want peace on earth. I want all good things, and yet I found that people that also want those things, unable to realize that that we're all a huge part of this problem. There are resource inputs to our whole economy. Every widget and gizmo you hold has stuff going into it that got mined from the earth and transported to a factory and turned into something that we now use. And all that produces waste. And that waste we call pollution. So we have this economic system which has resources going in, pollution going out. And the assumption is they can always get bigger. And the problem with that is that is impossible. Absolutely physically impossible. And yet we set up our institutional frameworks, our financial frameworks, and our habits and expectations as individuals based upon the availability of fossil fuel energy. And so we developed a culture that reinforces the idea that we can always get more.
So the question is, do we want to preserve a planet that resembles the one that we inherited from our ancestors? And if we do want to preserve that planet, then there are going to have to be some changes made in the way that we use energy, the rate that we use energy, and the fuels that we use for it.
Probably one of the most important social questions is how to change behavior. And one of the reasons why behavior is so difficult to modify is because so much of it is automatic. We just react to our current environment. We do things by habit, the way we've done them thousands of times before. If you think about making decisions to change your consumption patterns in order to provide a better environment for future generations, in order to reduce sort of CO2 emissions, that involves trade-offs between sort of getting benefits now and getting other types of benefits later. One thing that you find is that people are incredibly impatient as soon as one of the options allows for immediate consumption, immediate receipt of something that they value. So a blind spot is something to which we don't pay attention because it's oftentimes removed from us either in time or in space, and therefore it doesn't threaten us in any immediate way.
There's this great line by Zygmunt Bauman, rational people go quietly, meekly into a gas chamber if only you allow them to believe it's a bathroom. And what he's talking about is that at every step of the way, it was in the Jew's rational best interest to not resist. Would you rather get an ID card, or do you want to resist and possibly get killed? Do you want to move to a ghetto, or do you want to resist and possibly get killed? Do you want to get on a cattle car, or do you want to resist and possibly get killed? Do you want to take a shower, or do you want to resist and possibly get killed? At every step of the way, it was in their rational best interest to not resist. But that's all based on this whole system of make-believe. You have to make believe that what you know is going to happen to you is not going to happen to you. The same thing is happening today. I mean, Zygmunt Bauman says that rational people go quietly, meekly into a gas chamber if only allow them to believe it's a bathroom. And I'll say that rational people go quietly, meekly to the end of the world if only you allow them to believe that buying energy-saving bulbs is going to save the day. So we have all this, and we see this in personal relationships too, in abusive relationships. You see, if somebody's in an abusive relationship, they see one little bit of change. It's like, okay, now things are okay, and then they're not okay again. But they see one little bit of movement. Now things are okay, and they keep doing this again and again. They have to make believe constantly in order to maintain their place in this wretched relationship. And we have to do it too. We have to make believe that the planet isn't being killed. We have to make believe that money equates to happiness. We have to make believe that you can have infinite growth on a finite planet. I mean, we could list out, dozens of these ways. We have to make believe that the age of oil is going to go on forever. We have to make believe that the people who are living in toxic hell because of oil refineries, that they don't exist. We have to make believe that you can kill a planet and live on it too.
There's no way we're going to fix this mess by adjustments at the margin. That this is about a fundamental rethinking of what it means to be human, a fundamental rethinking of our relationships with one another, our institutions, our culture. And it means exposing and penetrating the stories of empire that keep us locked into this system. They create a kind of cultural trance that says, you know, this is just, it's right, it's the only way it can be. And so all our economic stories about economic growth, about you need wealthy investors to grow the economy, that, you know, you shouldn't have welfare programs because they just coddle lazy people. All our stories about money, money is wealth, people who are making money are creating wealth, and so therefore they own it. This is all clouding the reality that economic growth is really about rich people expropriating the property of poor people and turning it into garbage to make money for rich people, which gives them more power relative to the people who do not have property, are not participants in the financial ownership system and the financial games that it plays.
Difficult because it becomes hard to sustain the we. Different interests, different benefits, different costs.
For a while. And I worked on these iron ore freighters. You know, we go up here and get a whole load, however many thousand tons of this iron ore, and haul it down, throw it in a blast furnace in Buffalo, run back up and get some more. And I used to think, will we ever run out? And I can remember saying to myself, well, Al, you're just a dishwasher. There are smart people in Washington. If there's any danger of running out, they will act rationally and warn us so that we can reduce our consumption. And I'm ashamed to admit how many years it was before I realized that my trust was misplaced. And I suspect that if you ask any of these people on the street about these problems, you'll most likely find that they have faith that somebody intelligent is looking at these things. And that isn't a justified faith. We have to do our own thinking for ourselves. We can't let other people do our thinking for us, because a lot of people have ulterior motives, and they'll try to steer us in the wrong direction. A lot of them don't know what's going on, even though they're in positions of power.
The very specific example of the Great Depression of the 1930s, when the economic system went haywire, banks were closed, people were suddenly without their funds, people were out of jobs, massive unemployment and so on. And so in spite of the fact that we had these means of production, of producing ample supplies of the goods that people wanted and so on, we weren't, because of shutdown of factories. And the farms were producing what they defined as a surplus, but it wasn't a surplus in the sense that there was more than people really needed or wanted, but more than people could buy, because we were suddenly without funds and so on, with the banks closing, with the stock market crash and all that sort of thing. If we had seen that not just as an economic crisis, but had seen it as, this is what happens, folks, when you don't have access to the resources that you've grown accustomed to using or have grown accustomed to needing, that your lifestyle depends upon, then we could have seen it as a foretaste of what would come later when we had genuinely overshot real carrying capacity.
In the future, I think it is necessary that we have greater energy efficiency in the technology that we use. Not heard is something called the Jevons paradox. William Henry Jevons was an English economist who wrote in the mid-19th century. He said that when you increase efficiency in the use of a resource, ultimately more of the resource gets used than ever before.
The research shows that children who are living within a mile of a busy urban freeway lose as much as 1% of their lung function every single year. That now there's laws in many states, including California, that say you can't build a school within so many 100 feet of a freeway for that very reason. When you look at the science that shows that 100,000 people die prematurely in this country every single year from completely preventable petroleum-related air pollution, and that 6.5 million more suffer from asthma and other respiratory diseases.
In some respects, I think population is one of the worst problems we have in the world today, certainly one of the worst environmental problems, because almost anything else we try to tackle, whether it's pollution or climate change or dependence on fossil fuels, we can make incremental gains along the way, but then as the human population grows, it just wipes out anything we do. And then, of course, having those extra mouths to feed is ultimately a problem, because the Earth is a finite sphere, and global food production is going to be peaking very soon. Already, per capita, global grain production has peaked and is declining. So the responsible thing to do would be to rein in the human population. Gradually, over time, using all the most humane methods, increasing levels of education, making birth control methods more readily and cheaply available around the world.
One of the ways that you can tell, one of the sectors where you can see most easily how fossil fuel has transformed our way of life in this country is when you consider that a century ago, half of Americans were farmers. Now that number is under 1%. The Census Bureau no longer, you can't even check off farmer as one of your occupations because there aren't enough people to make it worth them listing it. There's a lot more people in prison than working on the farm. In the first place, there's a lot of people who would like to work on the farm and have been chased off it by the endless commercialization of agriculture. But in any event, what's impossible is continuing to spend 30 calories of fossil energy to bring 1 calorie of lettuce from California back to the East Coast. We've substituted oil for people. That's what's happened. Between big tractors and synthetic fertilizer, we have lots of oil doing the work of lots of people. That's had some benefits. We have incredible amount of cheap food. But as we've begun to understand even in the last few years, even that's not the greatest benefit in the world. It's one reason that Americans are now fat.
Food and energy are, and always have been, very closely related. Today, we use an incredible amount of energy in agriculture. Many, many times what we did before industrialization, and more energy all the time. If oil prices were to dramatically rise, say they were to double overnight, you would see broad impacts rippling through the agricultural sector, because the agricultural sector depends on energy. Farmers would be paying more for tractor fuel, truckers would be paying more for truck fuel, and the price in the supermarket would have to go up so that those industries could survive. So an energy crisis becomes a food crisis. The other thing that is happening today between energy and agriculture is biofuels. So for instance, in this country, we grow a lot of corn for ethanol, and as the cost of petroleum fuels rise, the competitiveness of the energy crops rises. So a farmer will be more inclined to grow corn for ethanol than they might be to grow a food crop, because ethanol competes with petroleum fuels. So there's kind of a two-pronged effect.
Okay, why don't we understand the ecological facets of our predicament and of life in general? Is it just because we are preoccupied with our own personal interests, or is it something more serious than that? I think it's both. Obviously, when I get into the car and I start up the engine, I step on the gas and I go someplace, I don't most of the time think about all of the effort of all those people out there drilling oil wells and pumping oil out of the ground and shipping it to a refinery and producing gasoline. I just think of where I'm going and the pleasure I'm going to have, or the purchase I'm going to make. It means that the whole approach to the study of history has been a non-ecological approach. We have simply been preoccupied with the political aspects of it and with the economic aspects of it, with the fact that we advanced from being an agrarian society to being an industrial society.
There is a much larger story here about the deeper causes of the crisis that we're in. And this is the story of how humanity turned from partnership relations to
organization by dominator hierarchy 5,000 years ago, which started organizing by these hierarchical structures. And when you organize by that kind of structure, you've got a few people on the top and you have a lot of people on the bottom. And there's a huge disparity between those. So it creates an enormous competition for the positions of power. And within that dynamic, it becomes imperative to maintain the system, to appropriate more and more of the resources to maintain that structure of dominance, to maintain the military forces, to maintain order, to maintain the priesthoods that develop the ideology and the religions that legitimate that dominator hierarchy.
We've been manipulated to believe the power in a pyramid is at the top. It ain't. The top of the pyramid is there because the rest of the pyramid's holding it up. We're holding this whole thing together. We, the powerless people, are holding the powerful people up there, and they know that. They're terrified of us realizing that. Do you remember that movie, animated movie, A Bug's Life? A Bug's Life with the grasshoppers? And what happened was there was these ants, and Ant Island as they called it, and these grasshoppers used to come every year and take all the food, and the ants had to spend a whole year gathering the food together for the grasshoppers because they were terrified of the grasshoppers. There weren't many of these grasshoppers, and one day they're in their winter quarters in a tree, these grasshoppers, and they've got all the food they need, and someone suggested among the rank and file grasshoppers that they didn't need to go to Ant Island this year because they had all the food they needed. And then out came the leader of the grasshoppers to tell them the facts of life, and the few are going to control the many. It's a wonderful speech. They outnumber us 100 to 1. And if ever they figure that out, there goes our way of life. So we have to keep the pressure on, basically. We have to keep them working, so they don't figure out where the real power is. And that's why this network of manipulation works so hard to keep us in these states. Like I said earlier, what are people leaving foreclosed homes for? Foreclosed by banks that have caused the unemployment that lead to them having to leave their homes. Stay there, refuse to leave, make it difficult for them. Expose them for what they are.
And then you begin to realize that that whole pattern is played out throughout 5,000 years, and it evolved through originally the city-states and then the nation-states, and now we see the melding of the corporation and state power, and all to maintain that dominator hierarchy by violence, by extreme violence.
There are two nightmare situations. One of them is that when those in power start to see their power slip, whether through external invasion or internal revolution or through ecological collapse, they'll just nuke the world. They'll destroy the world instead of losing their power. I think that's very, very possible. Another nightmare scenario is that this culture continues to sort of trundle on for another 500 years, just keeps taking off the top of mountaintops to get at coal, keeps doing everything it's doing, with the rich getting richer, the poor getting poorer, the rich getting more and more strange, as they, continue to explore space. It's insane to be exploring, is there life on other planets? We'll keep this up and there won't be life on this one, It's like, it's insane. So that's my other nightmare.
I think the big question facing all of us is, will we transition to cleaner energy systems, to ways of doing the things that we all need to do that are not going to continue to push the planet towards the tipping point? Or are we going to not act until it's too late?
And no matter what politicians say, a central part of the war is petroleum. Now go broaden your view a little bit and ask about all these global trade agreements that are getting to be somewhat controversial. I think that one of the principal motivations behind the U.S. support for those agreements, and its support from both Democratic and Republican Party, is to allow us to get our hands on their resources before they get developed and want to use them for themselves. We want to go to other countries and take their resources to drive our SUVs. One has to look at things in terms of arithmetic. And the interesting thing is that arithmetic and science that sort of goes with it, these aren't democratic.
The problem is that globalization also means that everybody is now tied in to this ecological overshoot we're in, and that it's very difficult for anybody in any particular place to feel that they can manage their own affairs. And it's not just for the resources, it's also for the pollution. So there's never been a time when all these civilizations around the world are essentially linked up through resource exchange in this globalized free trade system that in the short term gives us amazing economic growth, but in the long term makes us incredibly vulnerable to any shortfall in those resources, to political instability with any trade partner. And so massive amounts in terms of militarization to make sure that all these people keep trading with us. We set up gigantic banking frameworks and global trade agreements to say, you know, you better keep trading with us. And that all has a cost too. The bureaucracy has a huge cost.
The U.S. used to be the world's foremost oil-producing nation back in the early part of the 20th century. The U.S. reached its peak of production in 1970. It's been declining ever since. The same is going to happen to the world as a whole. No one disagrees about that.
When I was in college, I actually was a banker, and I'm not made to be a banker, so... Well, it was actually very depressing to me because I interacted with a lot of people, you know, doing transactions for them, and it just really surprised me as to how much money ruled their lives.
Well, I'm always worried about money.
Well, that was after the divorce, but yeah, $1,000 in debt, and I wasn't 30 yet.
Wonder where your next meal is going to come from. Pray that everything's going to work out all right.
I always worry about money, whether I have enough, whether I'm spending too much.
You got to make money. There's just no way around it, and you got to do what you got to do, short of illegal things.
I think that if money hadn't been an issue, we would have totally been okay.
Questions I have about money?
What is the actual worth of a dollar these days?
The standard view is that if you get richer, you get better off and you're happier. Well, it turns out not to be true. People's absolute standard of living, once they're above poverty, is pretty weakly related to happiness.
I'm going to make a rough claim that about 95% of family feuds, problems, breakdowns, are about money. And I'm probably conservative.
It's not just for people who are trying to make ends meet or who feel marginalized, but even our global billionaires are completely freaked out about money all the time. So having more money doesn't really resolve these problems we have around money.
Understanding the dollar. That means more than knowing what a dollar bill looks like or what a silver dollar is.
For the first time, essentially the entire world, willing or not, subscribes to the same set of economic.
Part of the difficulty is that very few people think about what money is, where it comes from, how it is created, and how it is controlled.
Well, remember, there has been 150 years of very intense propaganda and indoctrination to try to drive these ideas out of people's heads.
if we could unpack all of this mystification, we'd probably find that economics was made so complicated in order to mystify people, so they could not really figure it all out.
If everybody knew the full facts about how money is issued, how it's put into circulation, who is issuing it, how they have power and control over the economy and over individuals' lives, I think there'd be a lot of very unhappy people around.
It's often been said that money moves the world, or money is the engine of the world, or money makes the world go round, but in more accuracy, money stops the world from going.
Money, in any society, not just modern society, is a projection of the collective unconscious of that society. And the proof of that, is that every society takes its own money system for granted.
If you try and find out what people think money is, you will be mystified and amazed. It's a confusion, it's inaccurate, it's absurd, it's superstition, it's myth, it's religious, it's crazy. Most people haven't an idea, they just use it. Perhaps it'd be more accurate to say it uses them.
Most people have no idea where money comes from. A lot of people believe that it's the governments that create the money.
I'm not sure of the exact authority under which more money is released. I know the executive has some power over it. As long as when I cash my paycheck, it's there. That's all I'm really worried about anymore.
It comes from a big factory.
Okay.
They make it?
It's, I don't know, created by the government to control us.
Well, it'd have to be done by the government. I mean, that's what you would expect.
Conventional money is not created by the government, as many people believe, and is not even created by the central banks. Although they do part of it. But it is actually created by the banking system.
People see these films about the U.S. Mint and the government printing office, and they see these sheets of dollar bills being run off the printing presses. And so they think it's the government that's printing money. But this is not the real source of money. The real source of money is banks.
The banks have a complete monopoly on the money creation process. So the public are not actually involved in it at all, directly or indirectly.
The Federal Reserve is a private institution owned by commercial banks who are members of the Federal Reserve System, which includes all the nationally chartered banks.
Most people don't realize that the Federal Reserve is a private corporation and is for profit, and in fact, Federal Reserve, it's neither federal and it's not a reserve.
In 1910, a group of top American bankers met on Georgia's Jekyll Island to discuss ways of stabilizing the country's banking system. Congress passed the Federal Reserve Act in 1913, giving this private corporation a monopoly over issuing the nation's money supply. How then did the power to issue something as fundamental as money fall into private hands?
Initially, you could think a bank was about storing people's gold. So, come in, you store your gold at the bank, and the banker gives you a gold certificate and says, you have such and such amount of gold in my bank. Now, the basis of the paper money systems was when you could start trading those pieces of paper.
Let's say you have some gold that you want to keep safe. You put it in a bank, and the bank gives you a paper receipt you can redeem later for your gold. You can now trade that piece of paper in place of the gold, as long as others are also able to redeem it for your gold. The good name of the bank on the paper note assures people that behind the piece of paper is a piece of gold waiting to be redeemed. Soon, as the people's confidence in the bank grows, rather than cashing in the receipt, the person receiving the paper simply trades it again. The paper may end up being traded many times before being redeemed for the original gold in the bank.
And banks discovered that when people started paying each other with claims to the coins in the bank's vault rather than taking the coins out, that the bank didn't really need to keep all the coins in the vault in order to have enough to actually pay people who did come and want the coins.
The banker realizes nobody's coming to take the gold. Gold's just sitting there.
So instead of just putting out one piece of paper that says, you know, there's such and such amount of gold, you can put out a lot of pieces of paper given the fact that nobody is coming and taking the gold. And you can lend money. And the basis of that loan is the trust that people have that if they want to come and get the gold will be there.
A bank can print a receipt for gold that does not even exist. They can then loan that receipt to someone on the condition that they pay it back with interest. While the bank takes a risk by having less gold than the outstanding receipts, there is an almost unlimited potential to make profit off charging interest on loaning gold it does not even have. If people catch on that there isn't enough gold to redeem their receipts, they will all go to the bank at once to get their gold. If this happens, there will be a bank run. The bank will fail because it is caught without enough gold to back up its receipts. In 1934, in an attempt to prevent further bank failures, a series of banking reforms slowly took away people's ability to trade their paper money in for gold or silver. In 1971, Richard Nixon removed the last vestiges of this convertibility. Today, our money can no longer be redeemed for gold or silver.
Now we've gone beyond that to what I think of as an even more postmodern reality, which is we don't even see the money anymore. We don't hold it in our hands. We take a piece of plastic to the supermarket, buy groceries, and run it through a machine which registers it in our account book somewhere. The seller doesn't see it either, right? And at the end of the day, they balance accounts, and some numbers have been added to the supermarkets and taken out of ours account.
Most of the assets that we call money are not printed dollar bills. In fact, that currency is a very small proportion of the total amount of money. Most of what we call money are bank accounts.
In the same way that banks used to issue more paper money than they had gold, today banks issue more bank account money than they have cash reserves. It is these bank account balances that make up about 97% of what we think of as money.
Most economic textbooks never say what money is. They just say what money does. They describe money by its functions. They talk about things like minimum exchange, standard of value, store of value, or the classical ones. These are all things that money does. Money lives in a different space, in fact. It's an agreement. Money is created through a process of bank loans. People, companies, governments going to the banking system and borrowing money. So every dollar, every national currency you've ever seen is someone's debt.
For every new dollar created in the monetary system, you have a corresponding debt.
Money is issued whenever someone takes out a loan from the bank. When I say money is issued as debt, I mean they don't get that money from anywhere. They actually create it out of thin air and create a credit in my bank account, and poof, there it is.
There's more debt than money available. And the reason is that interest is not created. When you go to a bank and borrow $100,000 to buy a house, they will check whether you are a good credit, and then they will decide to create the money, entering it electronically in your account, and say you have to bring back $200,000 in the next 20 years. The $100,000 of the first loan is created. The second one, the interest rate, is not created. So they send you in the world, compete with everybody else, to bring in the second $100,000. That's how the money is kept scarce. It is through the competition between the different players for interest that is not created. So there's always less money than is necessary. Okay? And it's not systemic.
The money we get when we receive a loan is called principal. Our debt, however, is not discharged when we repay the principal. Bank loans are all made on the condition that people pay both the principal and the interest the bank charges. However, money can only be issued as principal. No one creates the interest, so the amount of debt owed is actually far greater than the amount of money there is to repay it. When $1 is loaned into the economy, it begins a loop. Joe the farmer gets a loan from the bank and pays Tom for fixing his tractor. Tom pays Jane for bread at the local bakery, and Jane in turn buys the wheat from Joe, who can now repay the loan. The problem is, Joe owes the bank interest on top of the principal. In order to avoid losing his property to the bank, Joe must go find other money making its own loop in the economy. He can now repay his loan with the interest, but the people in that loop are left without their money. They still need money to facilitate their exchanges and to repay the loan that issued the money they had been using. The only place they can get it is from other such debt loops. Since all money has an interest price tag attached, there will never be enough money to repay all the debt owed to banks. Therefore, some people will always have to go bankrupt or have their property repossessed by the bank.
It's not the scarcity that gives money its value. When we're talking about credit money, what gives it value is its ability to requisition whatever you want or need from the market.
Are you surprised that parents feel it's really important to teach their kids how to compete on every level? They want their kids to get those jobs. You know, another kind of response would be to get together and say, hey, wait a second, there's a problem with the structure here. But, you know, we have a very individualistic response to the problem.
The same thing that keeps a rich person from giving is the same thing that keeps a poor person from making. It's that conditioned way of thinking and seeing that we have to really begin to address. Those who consider themselves poor in this country are not poor. I think it's this scarcity mentality. You know, I think it's a belief system that we all carry.
Go anywhere in the world, these devastating dynamics are engineered.
So our experience of money as being scarce is an artifact of the money system. In a properly run monetary system, there will be no scarcity of money.
At the point of view of the corporation, getting more and more and more, that is driven in part by greed, in part by the dynamic of trying to get profits, capitalism, but it's also driven by fear. Because if you don't do it, if you can't expand faster than the next corporation, they will get research money, and they will get marketing money, and they will beat you and may drive you out of the game.
El humanismo o cualquier escrúpulo moral simplemente no son posibles en un mundo en el que reinan necesariamente, estructuralmente, la avidez, el deseo de poder y el cinismo más violento.
That's what it means to live two people to know a 4,000 square foot house and quarter mile from your nearest neighbor on some enormous subdivision.
Our culture in this way is unique in that we're completely atomized and isolated. Most folks who are born here and live here their whole life, their very neural connections in their brains are formed within a very high energy, high tech society. And now, let's say in the last maybe 20 years or so, as our society has sort of become too complex for its own good, more and more people, because they're kind of getting tossed by the wayside, I don't know, they start thinking, well, something's not right here. And since we're atomized, people don't start talking about their experiences with other people because they've sort of been shamed into it through what they watch on television and the rest of the media.
You're not quite as efficient in this plant as you ought to be by our calculations. This is the banker speaking. And so therefore, we're going to either raise the cost of your credit and drive you to do bad things to your workers or to your community or to the environment in order to boost that return and boost your stock price. And we will lend to you under those terms only.
The nice way of saying it is nice guys finish last. If you're callous to the effects on others, you have a potential to rise. The odds are that you can compete your way up. If you care and are socially concerned about others, you're at a tremendous disadvantage. So I think the competitive dynamic that we have does sort of weed out a set of people for success. But I would say that what it weeds out for success is not competence, not creativity, not intelligence, but callousness far more often.
It does have its place in urging us to our highest level of performance and fulfillment. But health is dependent on cooperation. We don't have the liver competing with the heart for blood and for nutrients. there is this inherent cooperation that leads to the health of the entire entity.
The nature to which people are able to be social, civilized, sympathetic, is quite amazing, and it's in contradiction to the nature of the money.
All you have to do is look at our Pentagon budget and see that a tiny fraction of it would really develop countries that we've been leveling instead. Very much more cost effective to make friends of them than it is to keep them as enemies.
Some would argue that these people are unemployed because they lack skills or because they don't want to work, and that may be true in a few cases, but in the vast majority that's not the reason why they're impoverished. The reason why they're impoverished is because you have this scarcity of money.
13th Amendment, which says you cannot treat a human being as a commodity for buying and selling. And the new economics is you can no longer buy or sell labor, but you can rent it. So the wage is you're renting somebody.
The word job was invented in the industrial age in England. It didn't exist before. And it describes a pile of things that one does for money.
We're in such conditions of duress, that you just couldn't survive except by being a slave. You might sign a contract that says, okay, I'll be your slave. That's by your own free will. I mean, are we going to take that seriously? Under some pathological assumptions, I suppose.
We live in an economy which takes 80% of each new generation and educates that 80% to obey orders and to endure boredom, and stifles their creativity, and stifles their capacities, and curtails them. They are systematically crushed by a system which does what? Which fills slots. And 80% of the slots need people who just do rote, tedious, repetitive labor, at least at work, and therefore are acclimated to doing that.
I mean, you could say, you know what, this is a terrible job, I don't want to do it. It's a free market, you have total choice to not show up under these terrible conditions. At the same time, if you don't, little problem here, you're not going to eat, and your family isn't going to eat. And that's why people...
It's that we do the work we do so often simply for the money. Now, since we're all chasing this money around, it utterly patterns our society.
And unfortunately, most people who are active in the sustainability movement and the environmental movement don't understand the nature of this problem. And we're not going to make any significant headway with sustainability or restoration of the environment until we solve the money problem.
The world's saying, look, you got a choice. You can either fix it or I can fix it. And if I fix it, you're not going to like it because I'm going to throw everything away. And everything means most of us.
And the world, no matter what damage you think you've done to it, will regenerate, will regreen, will redo everything that was here at one time, except there won't be any people. Because it's got all the time in the world. As you're coming down the final stretch, you're racing towards the finish, and there is the stone wall, and you're not pulling your horse. You're not stopping. You're in fact accelerating. That's the way I see the use of what you call resources. You're using them faster than they're reproducing. And you're headed towards that disaster, and none of you are pulling your horse. And the world has become, quote, a market. And it's this market that we have to deal with. And it's this idea of boundless and endless resources. And when you say resources, you're talking about our relatives, talking about our family. Fish are our family. It's not a resource, it's family. It requires all the respect. The structure of the world itself is such. It functions on natural law, and the natural law is a powerful regenerative process. There's a process of regeneration that continues and grows and is endless. It's absolutely endless if everyone agrees to the law and follows the law. But if you challenge the law and you think you're going to change the law, then you're bound to failure. And in that failure will be a lot of pain, because the natural law has no mercy. It is only the law.
You can't even begin to talk about how do we think like an ecosystem until you're aware of your place in your own culture, in your own society, that you aren't the only thing worth consideration. That everything around you is part of you, and that you have a responsibility for those around you. And in order to be aware of your place, you have to look at the place and understand the place, right? And it's, Earth, planet Earth.
Growth is a central characteristic of life. But in nature, growth is never linear and unlimited. While certain parts of organisms or ecosystems grow, others decline, releasing their components, recycling them, and thus providing resources for new growth. When we study nature, we can see quite clearly that unlimited quantitative growth, as promoted so vigorously by economists and politicians, is unsustainable. A good example is the rapid growth of cancer cells, which does not recognize any limits and is not sustainable because when the organism, the host organism, dies, the cancer cells too die. Similarly, unlimited quantitative economic growth on a finite planet cannot be sustained.
Whenever it rains, the trees direct a certain amount of the rainfall to the bark, and this bark is set up in these elaborate patterns to direct rain all the way around the tree.
Wow, really?
Yep. And in these crevices where bugs and ants and other critters live, you get a lot of exoskeletons that are shed in here. That then is dissolved by the rainwater. It runs down and it carries the phosphate from the bugs and the manure of bugs down into this. All of this organic material at the base here is what feeds the tree. So it's like a constant recycling of the material of life back into life. So it's more like a community of contributors, and you take what you need as you need it. So there's like a bank, like at the bottom of that fir tree. There's this bank of resources, and it's available to the tree, it's available to fungi, to the earthworm, to termites, to whatever comes along and needs it. And each time someone takes something, they generally contribute something. There isn't that kind of profit motive or interest or any of that in natural systems. It really isn't necessary to have more than you need, unless somehow you're acculturated to that belief system.
En ese espacio interior hay más de 7.000 millones de individuos que coexisten armoniosamente.
En cada cuerpo vivo, aunque sea en el nivel vegetativo y mucho más en el nivel animal, todos los sistemas funcionan de una manera integral, recíproca y armoniosa entre sí. Quiere decir que no tenemos ningún elemento que trabaje para sí mismo, sino que vive y existe únicamente para servir al cuerpo entero.
En ese espacio, los elementos interactúan a partir de una conciencia interna de su interconexión. Todos trabajan de acuerdo a un principio unificador. Es la fuerza detrás de toda la existencia, conectando los elementos en sistemas y los sistemas en un solo todo integrado. Esta es la cualidad del otorgamiento incondicional. Esto los motiva de manera instintiva hacia una dirección, trabajar por un propósito común, creando un suelo fértil para un nuevo, más grande e infinitamente más elevado nivel de existencia. Tú. No es solamente tu cuerpo físico el que está viendo esta pantalla, sino también ese punto deliberado de conciencia que está conectándose ahora con la idea de esta película. Este solo punto es una de 7.000 millones de células que conforman el cuerpo de la humanidad, tratando desesperadamente de manejar este sistema inmenso y complicado sin conocer o utilizar su principio unificador fundamental, la ley de la naturaleza. Este es el elemento faltante, el cual ha estado eludiendo la humanidad. En cuanto empecemos a imitar intencionalmente a las células, volviéndonos conscientes de la existencia de nuestro cuerpo común global, comenzaremos a sentir el principio unificador de la naturaleza trabajando dentro de nosotros. Al hacerlo, no solo trascenderemos los peligros de las soluciones miopes del hombre, sino que también crearemos algo maravilloso. Piensa en eso. Si tus células te crearon a ti, imagina lo que todos nosotros podríamos crear.
One of the things about local currency, I think that a lot of people are embracing it because they're starting to understand more about our federal economic system. Federal reserve notes don't necessarily serve the best interest of local communities.
The various regions of the United States could develop in a decentralized way according to the resources and the skills that they have in the region. And that's what created the great diversity and economic wealth of this country.
Complementary currency, in my definition, is an agreement in a community to use something, just about anything that they can agree on, as a medium of exchange. That's other than national conventional money.
A local currency is something that is issued at the time that it's backed by goods and services in our community. And when people advertise in the River Hours Trade Directory, they actually sign a commitment that says that they are backing in whole or in part that currency with their goods or services that they're offering, and that they're also agreeing to accept in whole or part some local currency. So when you get River Hours, it's backed by people in your community, and that's tangible.
Local currency is a way of encouraging people, inducing people to spend locally. And it's also a way to help people to support one another in the local economy when they maybe do not have any money.
It's been probably a third to half of my income.
River Hours is hopelessly and happily bound to our community. Their value always remains here, and I think people understand that.
Hours print their currency, and as soon as you print a currency, you have, in fact, in my opinion, created a problem, because you created a limited supply currency, which means there's only so much currency as there are notes in circulation, and then you end up with the same problem you have if you have something like a currency backed by gold, which is there's only so much gold. A mutual credit system, there's unlimited currency available in potential, and that's one of its great strengths.
In a mutual credit system, each person has an account. And at some times your account may be positive, at other times your account may be negative. Now, it's this allowance for a negative balance that is the fundamental feature of a credit clearing system.
In a case of mutual credit systems, the rule is, the game is, I do something for you, I get a credit, you have a debit. The sum of our two is 0. So, in other words, net, we've done nothing. But I have a credit and you have a debit.
Your debit means that you owe something to the community of traders in our credit clearing circle. My credit balance means that the circle owes something to me.
In a mutual credit system, everyone has an account. This account can go positive and it can go negative. When Bob repairs Andrew's hotel, Bob receives a credit and Andrew receives a debit. Bob can then use that credit to buy catering from Christine. Andrew works off his debit by providing lodging for Daniel. When Daniel does dental work for Christine, the credit and debit are cleared. No hard cash was needed, and everyone gained something in the transaction. As more people join the mutual credit clearing circle, this process can become more dynamic. Ultimately, no matter how big the circle gets, the value people contribute should remain equal to the value they take out.
This is money created not by a hierarchy, but is a medium of exchange that's created between us. Okay? We create the medium of exchange. Second, there's no interest. Okay? Third, it's not scarce.
When you start trading in forward exchange, many people talk about experiencing shift in consciousness. There's not a scarcity of that currency, so there's much less competition. So you end up with a completely different experience, and people talk about how cooperative, supportive. People are really concerned about your well-being.
And our small planet, at this moment, here we face a critical branch point in history. What we do with our world right now will propagate down through the centuries and powerfully affect the destiny of our descendants. It is well within our power to destroy our civilization and perhaps our species as well. If we capitulate to superstition or greed or stupidity, we can plunge our world into a darkness deeper than the time between the collapse of classical civilization and the Italian Renaissance. But we are also capable of using our compassion and our intelligence, our technology and our wealth to make an abundant and meaningful life for every inhabitant of this planet, to enhance enormously our understanding of the universe and to carry us to the stars.
When the European first came here, Columbus, we could drink out of any river. If the Europeans had lived the Indian way when they came, we'd still be drinking out of water, because the water is sacred. The air is sacred. Our DNA is made of the same DNA as the tree. The tree breathes what we exhale. When the tree exhales, we need what the tree exhales. So we have a common destiny with the tree. We are all from the earth. And when the earth, the water, the atmosphere is corrupted, then it will create its own reaction. Mother is reacting.
And every day that you don't do what's right is a day that you've lost an option. And you're losing your options every day. No tree grows by itself. A tree is a community. Certain trees, certain plants will gather around certain trees. and certain medicines will gather around those certain plants. So that if you kill all the trees, if you cut all the trees, then you're destroying the community. You're not just destroying a tree, you're destroying a whole community that surrounds it and thrives on it, and that may be very important medicine for people or for animals.
So you've lost the community, and if you clear cut, which is what's happening in America and Canada a great deal these days, and I guess around the world, then you are really a very destructive force. And simply replanting trees is not replanting community. You lost a lot in the process. If you don't understand that, you will. And that understanding comes in a very difficult manner.
And of the 100 dominant economic units in the world today, 49 are countries and 51 are corporations. Now, you digest that for a second. What does that mean? It means that corporations are the driving force of decision-making today. And corporations are not concerned with human rights. They're not concerned with human life. They're not even concerned with a proper wage for the people that are working for them. So what kind of decisions are going to be made on our behalf by this economic power? So I think that people have to become aware and become awake, and not, and power is always in the people's hands, authority. They need to come of one mind, and they need to challenge the values that are being shoved at them today, because this has become a consumer society. It's driven by economics. It's not driven by common sense.
We are now placing in your hands all life. And it is your responsibility and it is your duty to look after all life. And so when he was speaking like that, he wasn't talking about our aunts and our uncles and our cousins and our fathers and our mothers. He was talking about all life. He was talking about the trees. He was talking about the fish, the animals, everything that grows, everything with life, because it is a family.
We live in huge houses. We drive huge distances. We're going to feel that pinch if we start to change. We've become highly, highly individualized.
As Martin Luther King said, it's a wonderful saying, piece of oratory. Cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But consciousness asks the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but one must take it because it is right. Enough of being enslaved by these people, enough of being enslaved by our manipulated ignorance, enough of being enslaved by the fear of being who we are.
Unite.
We must unite. We must unite.
Wir müssen uns vereinigen.
We must unite.
We must unite.
We müssen uns vereinigen.
We must unite.
We must unite.
We must unite.
We must unite. 咱们要团结。We must unite.
Sandu eke hona chayda.
We must unite.
We must unite.
Debemos unirnos.
Lazım litlaka.
It's what to start stuff.
We must unite.
こそ一致団結の時である。
Project maintains if you don't want war, if you don't want poverty, hunger, unemployment, territorial disputes, and all the other problems that go with society, you have to declare the earth as the common heritage of all the world's people. If you fail to do that, you'll have problems to the amount of events you don't want to change. If we don't change, we'll have the same problems over and over again. The Venus Project is an attempt to design a world where poverty, war, prisons, police do not exist, because we deal with the problems themselves, the factors that shape arrogant behavior, aggression, all the things that paralyze our society and prevent it from growing. If you don't want war, if you don't want poverty, hunger, unemployment, you have to declare all the Earth's resources as the common heritage of all the world's people. All the artificial boundaries have to be removed so that people can travel anywhere. It has to be a global society. There are many people that feel, well, let's develop each country. You can't do that, because if the Russians do experiments with nuclear materials and the Chinese, that air goes all over the world. So it's very hard to work independently. So I would say, if you want these things, you have to change the way your society operates. Being civilized is an ongoing process. The more we learn, the more we know about the environment and human relations, the more we're able to deal with the problems. If we fail to do that, we won't be able to solve problems. If we go with traditional values, we won't be able to solve problems. First thing you have to do is do a survey of the Earth's resources and the carrying capacity of the environment. If you produce a population far in excess of the carrying capacity of the environment, you're going to have trouble. You're going to have malnutrition and all the problems that go with it. So first we have to find out what can each successive environment carry and maintain a population in accordance with the carrying capacity of the Earth, not what I like or somebody else likes or some politician's notions. It has to be based upon the carrying capacity of the Earth. Then we can design the parameters for the new society. Without a survey, we couldn't do that. Survey means physical disabilities, all the known diseases. That tells us how many hospitals we have to build. Of course, the survey would include available materials. Otherwise, if you just sit down and turn out a hospital or turn out a social plan, not based on what you have, not based on what Fresco believes, only statistical evidence. The end of what's your opinion.
Entire infrastructure, not based on the whims of any type of ideology, capitalist, socialist, fascist, whatever, what have you, communist. You do it based explicitly on the most efficient means to do it with the most peak efficiency possible based on the technology available at the time, the intellectual resource of the time.
And we have the resources today to house everyone, build hospitals all over the world, build schools all over the world, the finest equipment and labs for teaching and doing medical research, not a law solution. Put sonar and radar in automobiles so they can't hit one another. Man-made laws are attempts to deal with occurring problems, and not knowing how to solve them, they make a law. People have access to the necessities of life without servitude, debt, barter, trade. They behave very differently. You want all these things available without a price tag. When people have access to the necessities of life, their incentives change. What about the moon and the stars? New incentives arise. If you make a painting that you enjoy, you will enjoy giving it to other people, not selling it. Our society's major concern is mental development and to motivate each person to their highest potential. Because our philosophy is the smarter people are, the richer the world, because everybody becomes a contributor.
The smarter your kids are, the better my life will be, because they'll be contributing more constructively to the environment and to my life, because everything that we devise within a resource-based economy would be applied to society. There would be nothing to hold it back.
Kids will ask their parents, didn't you see the necessity of the machines? Dad, couldn't you see that war was inevitable when you produce scarcity? Isn't it obvious? Of course the kid will understand that you were pinheads, raised merely to serve the established institutions. We're such an abominable, sick society that we won't make the history book. They just say that large nations took land from smaller nations, used force and violence. You'll get history talked about as corrupt behavior all the way along until the beginning of the civilized world. That's when all the nations work together. World unification, working toward common good for all human beings, and without anyone being subservient to anyone else, without social stratification, whether it be technical elitism or any other kind of elitism, eradicated from the face of the earth. The system I advocate, a resource-based global economy, is not perfect. It's just a lot better than what we have. We can never achieve perfection. Engineers will never support this until they're thrown out of work. Only when people lose their homes, their jobs, do they give a damn about anything. Otherwise, they really don't care. Unfortunately, I'm not wishing this, but people have to lose their jobs, their homes, and confidence in the people they elected to political office. Then they're ready for something new. I don't know what propelled you guys to come here. Maybe you saw the Zeitgeist film or something. But engineers and successful people in this system like to keep things the way they are.
And nobody seems to notice, nobody seems to care. That's what the owners count on, the fact that Americans will probably remain willfully ignorant of the big red, white, and blue dick that's being jammed up their assholes every day. Because the owners of this country know the truth. It's called the American dream, because you have to be asleep to believe it.
Time to wake up.
I'll do my best.
I believe you will.
Los recientes eventos financieros están obligando a las potencias mundiales a tratar de controlar una creciente crisis global que avanza aceleradamente hacia el colapso. En una realidad donde las acciones de una nación pueden determinar el destino del mundo, algunos países están revirtiéndose hacia el proteccionismo económico. Otros líderes están dando pasos hacia la centralización del control bajo un gobierno mundial.
Imágenes de interminables colas de gente retirando su dinero de los bancos y la rotunda negación de los ciudadanos a seguir pagando sus hipotecas, seguros o cualquier tipo de impuesto ha sido la tónica imperante estas últimas semanas a lo largo y ancho del planeta. En clara respuesta a una crisis económica descaradamente prefabricada desde las altas esferas, los ciudadanos de los diferentes pueblos del mundo parecen haber dicho definitivamente basta, tomando las riendas de su propio destino y saliendo a la calle de forma pacífica exigiendo transparencia a sus gobiernos. Sin lugar a dudas, estamos viviendo un momento histórico. Si hace tan solo unos días el oro batía récords de cotización mientras colapsaban el dólar y el euro, hoy, y ante el anuncio del cierre temporal de Wall Street, debemos sumar a la lista de grandes aseguradoras, corporaciones, equipos de fútbol, cadenas de televisión, periódicos o grupos mediáticos que se han declarado ya en bancarrota, la ruptura y quiebra de la Organización de Países Productores de Petróleo, OPEP, y la suspensión de pagos de la otrora gloriosa NBA y toda la industria cinematográfica de Hollywood, confirmándose el derrumbamiento en toda regla de un sistema económico, político y social que parece haber escrito ya la última página de su historia. La aplicación de medidas de prevención y control militar preparadas por el gobierno de los Estados Unidos, donde se anunciaban revueltas debido a la escasez de recursos y al cierre de la mayoría de compañías y centros comerciales, se toparon a pie de calle con la negación de los soldados y la policía norteamericana a cargar contra su propio pueblo. La rebelión por parte de una facción de altos mandos del gobierno y el ejército de los Estados Unidos, fieles a los principios de la Constitución norteamericana, y el exilio masivo de las poblaciones a entornos rurales, donde se construyen numerosos asentamientos autosuficientes, son a día de hoy la gran realidad de lo que parece el fin de la soberanía del gigante americano como la más grande superpotencia del planeta. Destapada la trama de blanqueo de dinero de los grandes bancos, incluyendo los del Vaticano desde su conexión a la City londinense, y tras hacerse públicos datos escalofriantes que demuestran la relación directa entre las entidades financieras, la CIA y el MI6 con el tráfico de drogas a nivel mundial, una comisión especial formada por representantes de todos los países del mundo se encarga ahora de investigar a fondo y sacar a la luz pública la verdad de todo este oscuro entramado que coloca en el ojo del huracán a unas élites responsables de mover desde la sombra los hilos de un gobierno mundial secreto, haciendo uso de organizaciones financieras, políticas, científicas e incluso religiosas y ecologistas, cuyo único fin era el de servir a sus intereses personales. Así pues, la ONU, los parlamentos, la OTAN, la presidencia de los Estados Unidos, la Trilateral, el Club de Roma, la OMS, la CFR e incluso las ONGs como World Wildlife Fund o la mismísima Greenpeace, accionista de la petrolera Shell y financiada ante el asombro de muchos por la Fundación Rockefeller, están siendo investigadas a fondo. Las acciones de limpieza y transparencia se harán extensibles también a los llamados paraísos fiscales, cuyas cuentas van a ser estudiadas con detenimiento por los miembros de esta misma comisión. Acusados de crear e instigar la mayoría de las guerras, las crisis económicas, el terrorismo, las diferencias entre el primer y el tercer mundo o el tráfico de drogas, se abre un proceso por crímenes contra la humanidad ante un renovado Tribunal de la Haya a los miembros de unas élites que parecían ser especialistas en generar caos e inseguridad a través de la manipulación y el uso de banderas falsas. El objetivo de tal estrategia era el de imponer las soluciones diseñadas de antemano por ellos mismos, a partir de las cuales aseguraban el cumplimiento de una agenda que tenía como fin último la instauración de un nuevo orden mundial de corte esclavista y dictatorial. Entre los citados a declarar se incluyen varios miembros de diversas familias reales y algunos presidentes de gobierno, en lo que comprende una larga lista de nombres propios de presuntos colaboradores, asiduos la mayoría de ellos a las famosas reuniones del Club Bilderberg. Juzgados los responsables sobre la macroestafa del SIDA, el fraude del mediático calentamiento global, el Climatagate y el autoatentado del Golfo de México, ahora y tras conocerse la ocultación y manipulación de información sobre la cura del cáncer, un renovado sistema judicial será el que se encargue de sentar en el banquillo al sistema médico oficial y a las farmacéuticas, acusadas estas últimas de hacer un auténtico negocio de la salud, generando enfermos y financiando programas secretos para la creación de virus y vacunas asesinas como en el caso de la gripe A, que mermaban el sistema inmunológico de la población. Esto pone fin a una larga campaña de envenenamiento a nivel mundial orquestada por las mismas élites genocidas que ahora están siendo juzgadas en La Haya. Obsesionados con reducir la población mundial e impedir la evolución espiritual humana, dirigían un ataque constante a la población desde la inclusión y legalización de sustancias químicas nocivas en alimentos y bebidas, la fluorización del agua, los cultivos transgénicos o la contaminación del aire a través de los conocidos chemtrails, entre otras muchas. Se terminan los secretos de Estado. La presión y el boicot masivo mundial que estos días ejerce el pueblo sobre sus dirigentes está demostrando que el poder real siempre estuvo en la gente. Agrupaciones de ciudadanos organizados tanto localmente como a nivel mundial parecen estar creando alternativas políticas, económicas y sociales para el desarrollo de nuevos y mejorados sistemas de vida donde no se dependa de una autoridad estatal, sugiriendo la división de los poderes del Estado de forma que la autoridad real resida en la sociedad y sus representantes, desde donde la justicia y la transparencia deben ser factores fundamentales. En algunos países europeos se están planteando un periodo de libertad constituyente tras la escasa asistencia de la gente a las urnas en las últimas elecciones. A raíz de todo este vendaval de acontecimientos y gracias también a la acción y recogida de firmas de plataformas por la verdad como Stop Secrets, ayer empezaban a ser desclasificados todos los documentos y archivos sin excepción, tanto los que están en poder de los gobiernos como de las agencias y empresas privadas que hasta ahora tenían el rango de secretas, incluyendo los mismísimos archivos del Vaticano, que sigue devastado tras el gran terremoto. Parece que muchos de estos documentos podrían causar un giro radical a nuestra forma de entender la vida. El origen extraterrestre de la raza humana, el intercambio de información entre algunos de nuestros gobiernos y seres llegados de las estrellas y la ocultación de la existencia de tecnologías libres no contaminantes y de fuentes de energía gratuitas e ilimitadas que terminarían con los problemas energéticos de la humanidad quedarían, entre otros muchos hechos, ampliamente demostradas. Tras el derrocamiento pacífico de muchos de los gobiernos corruptos a lo largo y ancho del planeta, en toda Latinoamérica y lejos de cualquier revolución, se coreaba estos días sin cesar la palabra evolución, transmitiendo la clave de lo que parece estar ocurriendo realmente en todo el mundo, donde sigue sorprendiendo la serenidad con la que la gente actúa y se desenvuelve ante el aluvión de cambios que se están sucediendo a una velocidad trepidante, confirmando las previsiones más optimistas realizadas por algunos hombres de la nueva ciencia sobre la onda de conciencia que estaría llegando a la Tierra procedente del Sol de Alción en el centro de nuestra galaxia, con nuevos paquetes de información responsables de la regeneración de nuestro ADN, así como de la reactivación de nuestra memoria celular. La abolición del sistema de castas en la India, el desmantelamiento del narcotráfico de la CIA-NSA en México, la inauguración de la Segunda República primero en Argentina y después en otros países, o la unión de los pueblos ibéricos de España y Portugal convirtiéndose en la Nueva Iberia, son, junto a la caída del muro del Sáhara Occidental y la paz en Oriente Medio, otras de las noticias que llegaban a nuestra redacción estas últimas semanas. Y es que las diferencias históricas entre naciones parecen ir desapareciendo progresivamente. Mientras el pueblo saharaui regresa a su tierra tras décadas de exilio y dominación cruzando el muro ante unos soldados marroquíes que se niegan a disparar, en Jerusalén las imágenes de palestinos e israelíes abrazándose en las calles, emulando aquel gesto entre el presidente de Irán, el austero Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, y los principales rabinos fieles a la verdad de su pueblo, sellan el fin de un enfrentamiento histórico entre judíos y musulmanes. A nuestra memoria llegan ahora los días en los que, ante la insistencia del Estado de Israel para convencer a los dirigentes norteamericanos y a las Naciones Unidas de la imperiosa necesidad de entrar en guerra contra Irán, las manifestaciones pacíficas hicieron acto de presencia en todas las capitales del mundo árabe y occidental, uniéndose ambos mundos en una única voz a favor de la paz y la hermandad entre los pueblos. Árabes y occidentales somos hermanos, Bin Laden es la CIA, el Mossad y los servicios secretos británicos, o el 11S, Madrid y Londres son autotentados dirigidos por la OTAN, fueron algunas de las frases más coreadas por la gente desde las calles de las principales ciudades de todo el mundo, donde, para sorpresa de muchos, el mismísimo pueblo judío, negándose a seguir manipulado por sus propios dirigentes, se unía al resto de ciudadanos presionando al gobierno de Israel y a sus servicios secretos a dimitir y descubrir toda la verdad sobre el tergiversado holocausto judío y la relación existente entre los banqueros sionistas, la corona inglesa, el Vaticano y el mismísimo nazismo al que todos ellos en su día financiaron. Siguen estos días las numerosas detenciones de soldados y gobernantes sionistas efectuados por las fuerzas internacionales con el fin de llevarlos al Tribunal de la Haya. Tras el cese definitivo de las revueltas en China e India, el Consejo de Sabios, formado por un regenerado e irreconocible gobierno chino, ha decidido, por petición expresa de su pueblo, recuperar sus antiguos valores filosóficos y espirituales, erigiéndose en estos momentos de cambio y ante un renovado panorama internacional en un espejo para el resto de pueblos del planeta, en lo que representa un cambio de liderazgo a nivel mundial. Descubierta la inmensa red de pirámides y complejos subterráneos conectados entre sí a lo largo y ancho del planeta, y tras la aparición de fabulosos artefactos de origen alienígena y calaveras de cristal como las encontradas recientemente en Perú y en México, continúan emergiendo en diferentes puntos del globo lo que parecen ser restos de antiguas civilizaciones que tendrían, según algunos expertos, más de 500.000 años de antigüedad. Los nuevos líderes mundiales, escogidos espontáneamente por sus propios pueblos con comités populares en cada barrio, siguen trabajando unidos en la creación de un nuevo sistema económico en el que se pretende nacionalizar la banca y abolir la deuda para empezar desde cero de forma justa y transparente en lo que sería una transición hacia un mundo sin dinero, donde el trueque pasaría a ser el modo de intercambio natural.
To get away from the nationalism. He called it the Earth Anthem. And the world that he describes here is the world that is just a thought away, just an open heart away, just a change of perception away. We can think hate, we can think love. We can create a world dominated by hate and fear, or we can create a world dominated by love, compassion. It's just a choice, and we all have the opportunity to do that. So I'll leave you with these words, with the emphasis that this is the world we can and will create. When we heal ourselves, we heal the world. When we change ourselves, we change the world. When we love ourselves, we love the world. And when we love the world, it manifests in a very different form to the one I've been talking about these hours over these thousands of years of manipulation. Freedom is upon us. Time to grasp it.
I am asking no one in this theatre, no one watching this program, no one on this planet to believe a word of it.
But why are you saying it then?
Because the fundamental law of creation is that of free will. And I frankly don't care what anyone thinks. They have free will to make their own choices on what is said. I say wait and see.
Ladies and gentlemen, David Icke.
Thank you.